The bell does not ring. It never does, not on this morning. Mist clings low over Hollowmere, pooling in the cobbled seams between houses, curling around lantern posts, long since burned to nothing. The village wakes the way it always wakes after the hollow night, slowly, silently, as though surfacing from water too deep to remember diving into. Doors stand open that were bolted the evening before. A trail of mud crosses the miller's threshold and disappears at the hearth. An old woman finds her palms scraped raw and stares at them as though they belong to someone else. No one asks why. No one ever asks why. Elara Voss steps into the cold, a shawl drawn tight across her shoulders, her breath fogging in the pale air. Her knuckles ache, a small, distant throb she cannot place. She flexes her fingers, frowns, and lets it go, the way everyone in Hollowmere has learned to let things go. Down the lane, neighbors greet one another with the same tired, knowing half-smile, the smile of people who share a wound none of them can locate. As someone sweeps ash from a doorstep that was cleaned the day before. A dog barks at nothing, hackles raised toward the bell tower on the hill, its bronze bell dark and still against the waking sky. This is how it has always been. One night a year the village closes its eyes together, and the morning after, no one opens them quite the same. Hollowmere calls it tradition. It calls the forgetting sacred. Elara used to believe that too, until 7 years ago, when her mother walked into a hollow night and never walked out of one again. Somewhere beneath the fog, something in this village remembers everything still, and it is waiting for her. Hollowmere is a village that survives by keeping its hands busy and its questions quiet, and no one embodies that quite like Elara Voss. Her home sits at the edge of the Weaver's Row, where the click of the loom has replaced the sound of her own voice for 7 years. Thread by thread, she builds patterns no one asked for. Spirals that mean nothing, knots that unravel themselves if she isn't careful. It is easier than thinking. It is easier than remembering. The elders watch her the way they watch all the Voss family now. Carefully, from a distance, the way you watch a wound that might reopen if pressed. Old Marin, who leads the village council, greets her with polite formality and nothing more, her eyes flicking away whenever Elara asks too directly about the past. There are questions in Hollowmere that get answered with silence instead of lies, and silence, Elara has learned, is its own kind of confession. Her mother's loom still stands in the corner of the workshop, untouched, gathering dust in patterns that almost look deliberate. 7 years ago, on the night before Hollow Night, her mother kissed her forehead and told her she loved her more than thread loves its shape. By morning, she was gone. Not dead. The village never called it death. Simply gone, the way a name is gone from a page once it's been erased. The village mourned for exactly 1 season, then moved on, because that is what Hollowmere does. It forgets. It always forgets. Elara did not forget. She simply learned not to ask out loud, until the questions began asking themselves. It is tucked between the warped threads of her loom, so small she almost weaves over it without noticing. A photograph, its edges soft with handling, though she has never held it before in her life. Elara lifts it to the light with trembling fingers. It is her, unmistakably her, standing at the base of the bell tower in the dead of night, the bronze bell looming dark above her head. Her expression in the photograph is not fear, it is something closer to recognition, as though she had been expecting whoever held the camera. She has no memory of this, no memory of climbing the hill in darkness, no memory of standing so close to the one place in Hollowmere everyone is taught, without ever being told directly, to avoid after nightfall. She turns the photograph over, and her breath catches. On the back, in handwriting that is unmistakably her own, The same slant, the same careless loop on every letter one, are 3 words she does not remember writing. Don't let them. Don't let them what? Take her. Forget her. The words offer no context, only the cold certainty that some version of herself once stood in that exact spot, knew something urgent enough to write down, and then chose, or was forced, to forget it completely. Elara sits very still, the workshop suddenly too quiet, the loom's thread suspended mid-pattern like a held breath. Outside, the fog has not lifted. It rarely does before noon in Hollowmere, as though the village itself prefers not to see too clearly. She thinks of her mother's untouched loom in the corner. She thinks of the ache in her knuckles that morning after Hollow Night, the one she'd dismissed without question. For the first time in 7 years, Elara does not let the question go. She tucks the photograph into her pocket, close to her heart. Character dialogue. N/A. No dialogue. Narration only. And decides, quietly, deliberately, that she will find out what the means, whatever it costs her. The village square is busy with the ordinary business of mourning. Bread carried in baskets, water drawn from the well, children chasing each other between the wagon wheels. And Elara moves through it all with a question, burning quietly behind her ribs. She starts small, careful. She asks the baker, an old friend of her mother's, if he remembers anything strange about the bell tower. He wipes his hands on his apron, offers a tight smile, and tells her the ovens need tending, though the ovens, she notices, are already cold. She asks the miller's wife, who was kind to her as a child, whether anyone still climbs the hill at night. The woman's face goes pale beneath her flour-dusted cheeks. Nobody goes near the tower after dark, dear. Nobody sensible. Then she turns away too quickly, gathering her basket like the conversation itself might follow her home. By midday, Elara has asked 6 people the same careful questions, and received 6 variations of the same practiced silence, polite, evasive, final. It is old Marin who finally speaks plainly, though not kindly. She finds Elara near the well, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of Elara's face as though searching for something specific. Some doors close because they should, child. Marin's voice is low, almost gentle, but there is steel beneath it. Your mother asked questions too. Look where that led her. The words land like a struck bell, echoing longer than they should. Elara opens her mouth to press further, but Marin is already walking away, her dark robe disappearing into the mist-thinned crowd, leaving behind only the unmistakable weight of a threat, wearing the mask of a warning. Elara stands alone by the well, the cold water reflecting a face she barely recognizes, one that has stopped accepting silence as an answer. The cellar beneath the Voss house has not been opened since the funeral that never happened. The one Hollowmere refused to hold because it does not bury people. It calls gone. Elara descends the narrow stone steps with a single candle, its flame trembling against walls slick with old moisture. Cobwebs stretch between forgotten crates, and dust rises in slow spirals with every footstep, disturbed for the first time in 7 years. In the far corner, beneath a floorboard that creaks louder than the rest, she finds it, her mother's journal, its leather cover swollen with damp, the pages inside brittle but intact. She sits on the cold stone floor and opens it with careful, reverent hands. The early entries are ordinary, weather weaving patterns, a recipe for bread that never rose properly. But as the pages progress toward the final months, her mother's handwriting begins to change, tighter, faster, pressed harder into the paper, as though she were racing against something only she could see. The debt comes due again this year. One entry reads, "The keeper grows hungrier each cycle. I fear what happens if we cannot pay it." Another, dated only days before her disappearance. Elara asked about the tower today. She is too curious for her own safety. I must find a way to keep her from ever being chosen. The final entry is barely legible, the ink smeared as though written in haste or in fear. If they come for her instead of me, I will go. I will always choose her. Ilara's hands begin to shake. The candle flame gutters, though there is no wind in this sealed, airless room. Her mother knew. Her mother had always known. About the debt, about the keeper, about a choice that was never really a choice at all. And somewhere in that final, trembling sentence, Elara finds the shape of a truth she is not yet ready to hold. Her mother did not disappear. Her mother made a trade. Elara is not the only one carrying pieces of a night she cannot fully remember. She simply used to think she was. It begins with the miller's wife, the same woman who paled at the mention of the tower. Elara finds her sitting alone on her doorstep 2 days later, staring at her own hands with an expression Elara now recognizes too well. The look of someone trying to remember the shape of something that keeps slipping away. "I dreamed of bells last night," the woman admits, not quite meeting Elara's eyes. Bells and mud in my husband's face, but wrong somehow. Older, afraid. She laughs it off quickly, dismissing it as nothing, but her hands do not stop trembling as she speaks. Then it is the baker, muttering under his breath about a sound he cannot place. A low resonant hum that follows him through his sleep and lingers even after he wakes. Then it is the children, 3 of them, playing a game near the well that involves counting backward from 13 and covering their eyes, a game none of their parents taught them, and none of them can explain where they learned. Small things, fractures, cracks appearing in a silence that has held for generations, without ever once showing weakness. Elara begins keeping a list, hidden inside the pages of her own private notebook. Names, dates, fragments. A pattern forms slowly, the way frost creeps across glass. The closer the village gets to the next hollow night, the more these broken pieces surface. Nightmares intensify. Old wounds reopen without explanation. A woman 2 streets over wakes with her hair gone white overnight and no memory of how. Something that has always been contained, controlled, and carefully swallowed by tradition is beginning to leak through the seams. Elara sits with her notebook in the fading evening light, watching the fog roll down from the hillside earlier than it should, thicker than she has ever seen it. For the first time, she allows herself to consider a possibility more frightening than her own missing memories. This year, whatever the village forgets every hollow night, it is no longer staying forgotten. Elara does not plan to follow them. It happens the way most dangerous decisions happen, quietly, almost by accident, until it is too late to turn back. She sees the elders, first from her workshop window, a small procession moving through the blue hour toward the hillside path, their dark robes indistinguishable from the deepening shadows. Old Marin leads them, a lantern swinging from her weathered hand, its flame the only warm light in a world going steadily, deliberately dark. Elara tells herself she is only curious. She tells herself this as she pulls her shawl tighter, slips out her own door, and follows the procession at a careful distance, staying low along the tree line that borders the winding path to the bell tower. The climb is longer than she remembers it looking from the village below. By the time she reaches the ridge overlooking the tower clearing, her breath comes ragged, Her palms scraped raw against loose stone. An ache she recognizes now, an ache that finally makes sense. Below her, in the clearing beneath the silent bronze bell, the elders have formed a circle. Their voices rise together in a low resonant chant, words in a language Elara does not recognize but feels somehow familiar, as though her body remembers a rhythm her mind never learned. Old Marin steps into the center of the circle, carrying a heavy leather ledger. Its cover cracked with age. She opens it with ceremonial slowness, and by lantern light Elara can just make out row after row of names, some crossed out in faded ink, others newly added in ink still dark and wet. A cold understanding settles into Elara's chest like winter water. This is not superstition. This is not tradition performed out of empty habit. This is a system, a ledger, a careful, deliberate accounting of something owed and something paid year after year, name after name. And the elders standing in that circle are not merely remembering the debt, they are actively managing it, keeping the books, deciding who among the village will be written into the pages next. Elara presses herself flatter against the cold earth, her heart hammering, and watches old Marin's pen hover over a blank line at the bottom of the ledger, waiting to be filled. Elara does not remember the walk home. She remembers only fragments, cold stone beneath her palms, the taste of fear at the back of her throat, and the sound of her own heartbeat, drowning out the elders' fading chant as she fled the ridge. By morning, she has made her decision. She will not wait for silence to answer her again. She finds Elder Bram alone, tending his modest garden at the edge of the village. The one elder who has always looked at her with something closer to pity than suspicion. He is old, older than Marin, his hands trembling faintly as he works the soil, as though carrying a weight even his own body has grown tired of holding. "You followed us," he says without turning around. And it is not a question. Elara does not deny it. She simply waits, her silence finally becoming a kind of leverage rather than a wound. Bram sighs, a long, weary sound, and finally meets her eyes. What he tells her unravels 7 years of careful not knowing in the span of a few quiet minutes. Generations ago, he explains, Hollowmere was dying, crops failing, sickness spreading, the mountain itself seeming to turn against the people who lived in its shadow. The village elders of that time made a bargain with something ancient beneath the earth, something the old texts call only the Keeper, a presence bound to the mountain long before Hollowmere existed at all. The terms were simple and terrible. One night each year the village would surrender itself completely, memory, will, awareness, allowing the Keeper to move freely among them, to take what sustenance it required from the space between remembering and forgetting. In exchange, the village would be spared, the crops would grow, the sickness would lift, Hollowmere would survive. But sustenance was never enough, not truly. Bram continues, his voice dropping lower. Sometimes the Keeper requires more, a life, a name written into the ledger and never crossed back out. The elders decide who. We have always decided who. Elara's stomach turns cold. And this year? Bram's eyes, pale and rheumy, hold hers with unbearable gentleness. This year the bargain is breaking. The Keeper grows restless outside its allotted night. The debt has not been properly paid in longer than you know, and something long asleep is waking up hungrier than it has been in 100 years. He pauses, and when he speaks again, his voice trembles with something that sounds dangerously close to guilt. Elara, 7 years ago, your mother was not taken. Your mother volunteered. The words hang in the cold morning air long after Bram has spoken them, and Elara feels the ground shift beneath her, though she has not moved at all. Volunteered, she repeats, the word tasting foreign in her mouth, wrong in a way she cannot yet fully name. That's not possible. She would have told me. She would have done exactly what she did, Bram says gently, though there is no comfort in his gentleness, only the weary honesty of a man who has carried this secret far too long. She protected you the only way this village allows a mother to protect her child. He tells her the rest slowly, as though each word costs him something. 2 names had been written in the ledger that year, 7 years ago. 2 possibilities the keeper could choose between when the night came to claim its due. One name was Elara's, 19 years old, curious, already asking questions the elders found dangerous. The other was her mother's. The choosing is not entirely certain, Bram explains. The keeper senses fear, senses resistance, senses which soul burns brightest, and which one might slip through its fingers into forgetting anyway. Your mother spent the final months before that hollow night making herself impossible to ignore. She made herself the loudest, brightest, most present soul in that circle, so the keeper would have no choice but to see her instead of you. Elara's knees nearly buckle. She thinks of the journal entry, the ink pressed so hard it nearly tore the page. If they come for her instead of me, I will go. I will always choose her. It was never a metaphor. It was a plan. Your mother did not disappear into forgetting, Elara, Bram says, his voice breaking slightly on her name. She walked into that circle already choosing to be seen, already choosing to be taken, so that you would never have to make that choice yourself. It was the last decision she was allowed to make, and she made it entirely, completely, for you. The fog around them seems to thicken, pressing close, as though the village itself is listening. Elara stands very still, 7 years of grief reshaping itself into something heavier, more complicated, more unbearably loving than she ever allowed herself to imagine. Her mother was not taken from her. Her mother gave herself away. The village does not notice the change at first. Not in the way Elara does. Not with the weight of newfound truth pressing against every quiet moment. But by afternoon, even those who have spent their whole lives choosing not to see, begin finally to see. It starts with old Maren herself, stumbling mid-sentence in the middle of the market square, her hand flying to her temple as though struck by something invisible. She recovers quickly, waves away the concern of nearby villagers, but Elara, watching from across the square, catches the flicker of genuine fear behind the elder's practiced composure. Then the miller collapses without warning near his own mill wheel, murmuring names that are not his family's names. Names from decades past. Names that belong to the ledger and not to the living. He wakes disoriented, unable to say how long he had been standing there. Unable to say why his hands smell faintly of river water, though he has not left dry land all day. By late afternoon, 3 more villagers report the same symptoms, sudden blackouts, fragments of memory bleeding sideways into moments that should be ordinary, familiar faces momentarily unrecognizable before snapping back into focus. The fog, which should be thinning by now, instead grows thicker, curling low across the cobblestones even beneath direct sunlight. Panic moves through Hollowmere, the way fire moves through dry grass. Quiet at first, then all at once. By evening, the village elders gather the remaining council in the meeting hall, their voices raised in argument. Elara can hear even from outside the thick wooden doors. She catches fragments, The boundary is failing. The keeper cannot be contained past its allotted hour. A new offering must be chosen tonight, before sunset fully claims the sky. Elara's blood runs cold. Tonight, not next year, not on the appointed cycle everyone has always trusted to hold. Tonight, the village intends to choose someone, anyone, simply to buy themselves more time. She thinks of her mother's ledger entry. She thinks of a blank line waiting to be filled. Whatever happens next, Elara understands with sudden, terrible clarity that she cannot let another name, any name, be written down without a fight. The sun sinks behind the mountains faster than it should, as though even the sky is complicit in Hollowmere's unraveling, and Elara runs. She runs past the meeting hall where the elders' argument has finally spilled into the darkening street, past frightened neighbors bolting their doors against a night that has never once needed locks to enforce its will. She runs up the winding hillside path her mother once walked, her lungs burning, her mother's journal clutched against her chest like a shield. By the time she reaches the clearing, the ritual has already begun. The elders stand in their circle beneath the bell tower, lanterns lit, voices rising in the same low chant Elara overheard days before. Except now the air itself seems to bend around the sound, thick and heavy, charged with something ancient and awake. Old Marin stands at the center, the ledger open in her trembling hands, a quill hovering above a blank line. "Stop!" Elara's voice tears through the chant, raw and unpracticed at defiance. The circle breaks. Faces turn toward her. Shock, fear, and something almost like relief, as though some small part of every elder present had been waiting for someone brave enough to interrupt. "You cannot be here," Marin says, though her voice lacks its usual iron. "This does not concern you." "It concerns everyone," Elara answers, stepping fully into the clearing, into the lantern light. "You're about to write someone's name into that ledger, someone's mother, someone's child, because you're afraid, just like you did to mine." The mist around the clearing shifts. It does not simply thicken. It moves deliberately, curling inward with a low resonant hum that Elara recognizes instantly. The same hum the baker described, the same bells the miller's wife dreamed of. The fog gathers itself into something with shape, with presence, though never quite solid enough to name. An outline of vast, patient awareness, pressing at the edges of the clearing like a held breath, finally released. The Keeper. Every elder in the circle drops to their knees except Marin, who stands rigid, ledger clutched to her chest. Elara expects terror. Instead, standing this close, she feels something closer to grief, an ancient, exhausted sorrow radiating from the presence surrounding them. A loneliness so vast it has curdled into hunger simply from centuries of being fed silence instead of memory, forgetting instead of being truly known. "You don't want an offering," Elara says slowly, understanding arriving like sunrise breaking through fog. "You want to be remembered. All this time we've been starving you by forgetting, and it's made you desperate, not evil." The mist trembles, somewhere within it, faint and impossible. Elara hears, or perhaps feels, a single word, formed not from sound but from something older than language. Remember. Elara does not step back. She steps forward into the mist until she stands close enough to feel the ancient sorrow radiating from the Keeper, like cold breath against her skin. "I remember you," she says, and means it with everything she has left. "Not as a monster, not as a debt. I remember what my mother did for me, and I refuse to forget it, or you ever again." She opens her mother's journal and begins to read aloud, every fragile, frightened, loving word, her voice carrying across the clearing, across the kneeling elders, into the fog itself. She speaks her mother's name. She speaks her own. She speaks the names from the ledger, every crossed-out line, every silenced life the village tried to erase instead of honor. The mist does not attack. It listens. Slowly, achingly, the vast presence begins to soften, its hunger easing into something quieter, not satisfied, but seen, perhaps, for the first time in 100 years. The pressure in the clearing lifts like an exhaled breath. The keeper does not vanish. It simply recedes, patient now, no longer starving. Old Marin lowers the ledger, her hands finally steady. No new name is written that night. By morning, Hollowmere wakes changed. For the first time in generations, no one has forgotten. The villagers remember the fear, the fog, the ancient grief beneath their mountain. And instead of burying it in silence, they begin, tentatively, to speak of it aloud. Elara climbs the hillside path one final time, alone, and stands before the bell tower in the pale morning light. She reaches up and rings the bell. Not as a warning, not as a summons, but as a promise. The sound rolls down over Hollowmere, clear and unafraid. Somewhere in the fog, something ancient listens, and for the first time, does not feel alone.